Hi, today I'm going to talk about how to design your own custom multi-layer mandala and cut it on a laser cutter. Hi, welcome to Gray Lightning, my video blog about making things and playing games. And I have been really fascinated by the number of intricate and lovely multi-level mandalas I've seen people selling in their Etsy shops and in other places online. And I thought that is a great technique. I really want to learn how to do that. So I learned the same way you do. I went and looked for a video to show me what I needed to know. And I found a really great tutorial, and I'm going to put a link to that in the description of this video. And I followed that tutorial, and I was able to come up with this design here. Now, unfortunately, when I went through the tutorial, something happened to me that often happens to me when I do Illustrator tutorials. And that's that even though I know how to use Illustrator, I would follow the instructions, and because the person doing it is so experienced, I think they skip over steps, or I'm not sure what the reason is. I just know that when I follow what I see them do, it doesn't always work for me. So I actually ran into several problems learning how to do this. So what I'm going to try to do in this video is really distill what I learned down into a set of simple steps and skills that if you learn those, you should be able to create your own custom design. Now, why should you want to make a custom design? Why not just download somebody else's files and cut them? I think it's really important to learn how to do your own designs. And that's why so much of my videos, usually half of every video, the first half is about design, the second half is about construction or fabrication. And that's because I think what really empowers us as makers is learning how to do our own designs. I'm already halfway through my next project, which takes this technique, but applies it to do a totally custom work of art for the wall of my porch, using elements from the rug that is in the porch as design elements for the art piece. And that's the kind of empowerment you get from knowing how to do your own designs. So that's where I'm heading with this, but we'll start out with the basics, how to do one of these, how to prepare the files to cut them on a laser cutter, and then cutting them. The first thing you need to know is what are the requirements for a successful laser cut mandala. This is the one I did for my tutorial, and the basic requirement is that every layer has to be a single piece. This is the top layer, and everything in it is connected. The same with the middle layer. Everything goes to the outside frame and is connected. And then the bottom layer, the same is true. Of course, you have aesthetic goals. You want it to be attractive. You want it to be a combination of repetition and uniqueness, but it all has to connect together. This makes assembly easy, and setting up the design space will make the design process more efficient. So I'm going to create a brand new design, and I start by creating a new document. I'm going to make it 12 by 12. And I'm going to turn on the grid. The grid is done in inches, and I have 1/8 inch increments in the grid. And I'm going to turn on the rulers. And the first thing you want to do is to put in place a couple of guides. So I'm going to pull out my horizontal guide from the top ruler and pull out the vertical. And I'm going to save these on a separate layer. A very important part of this process is having separate layers for things and to turn on the visibility and the locks on those layers as appropriate. Now, the idea for this next part is completely from the Dave Watkins tutorial, so thank you to him for this. I'm going to create swatches to the side of the actual drawing space. I've got one of these for each of the layers. I have 3 layers I'm going to be doing a lot of work on, and I'm going to make 3 copies. Each swatch is going to represent a stroke style that I want to use a lot in my drawing. I have light gray on the top, medium gray in the middle, and dark gray on the bottom layer. I'll tend to use the thinner strokes on the top layer and the fatter ones on the bottom layer. And the last dimension I'm going to capture here is alignment. So this last column I'm going to set to putting the stroke on the outside of the path. The middle set is going to be setting the stroke to the inside of the path. You'll see how it gets smaller here. And then the first represents the default, which is that the stroke is centered on the path. Now I'm going to create a layer in the drawing for each layer of the actual mandala. And there's 4. There's the top, middle, and bottom layers of the design, and then a 4th layer, which is just the background, because even though that's a simple layer, it's an important one. The next skill is to know how to use the basic shapes in Illustrator, which are predominantly the rectangle and the ellipse. I'm going to create a rectangle here on the bottom layer. I type in 12 inches for the height and the width. And then I go to transform and I type in 6 and 6 for the center of that square. And it centers the square on the drawing. Now that's just a path. I have to apply a stroke to it. So I'm going to get the eyedropper and I'm going to go over and use one of these swatches. I'm going to use a bottom layer style and the one that is for drawing inside the path, because I want this frame to be inside the drawing. I hit Control-C to copy that square. I lock that bottom layer so I don't change it. I go to the middle layer and I'm going to copy and paste it. I center it again, and then now I use a middle layer style, but I still use the inside the path version of it. Then I paste that on the top layer, I center it, and now I'm going to use my eyedropper to select the top layer style that's also inside the path. For the background, I'm just going to make a square, a 12-inch square, and I'm going to fill it. And then I'm just going to turn the visibility off because it's not really important for this exercise. It'll be very important for the colorization exercise, which is the next video. So that's really it for rectangles. Ellipses are the more important shape in a mandala. You can find it by right-clicking the rectangle on the toolbar, hold down the Alt key, and you can draw it from the center. And we're just going to make this oval shape. Now, a very important keyboard shortcut is I. I stands for eyedropper. So pick the top style and it's centered on the path. Now we're going to use the 4th basic skill, rotation. This keyboard shortcut is also easy to remember. It's an R. When you type R, it brings up the rotation icon and it puts a little blue crosshair where it thinks is the point you want to rotate around. If that location is correct, you can open this dialog box, put in the angle that you want, and because we want to make a second copy, we'll just hit the copy button. And then it makes that transformation. Now, if you want to do that again, you just hit Control-D. So now we have these 4 ellipses and we want to copy them and paste them onto the other layers. I use the selection tool to draw a box around them. Control-C to copy, and then I'm going to lock the top layer so I don't mess it up, and unlock the middle layer, select it, and then I'm going to do Control-V to paste. Another way to move something to the center are to use these alignment icons. I am a very visual person, so that's really my preferred method, though sometimes it can get you into trouble, and I'll talk about that later. Hit I for the eyedropper. Pick the middle layer centered on the path style, then lock that layer, unlock the bottom, Control-V to paste it there, center it using the align to vertical icon, hit I for the eyedropper, get the bottom layer style centered on the path, and now you have all 3 layers done. Skill 5 is to learn the basics of the pen tool. You don't have to know everything here because it's complicated, but you do need to know how to do the basics. So you click in a spot, you go to a new spot, you click there, it draws a line. You go to the next spot, you click there, it draws a line. It wants to keep going. The way you break the line is by hitting V to pull up the selection tool. V selects a whole shape. A is a direct selection of a single anchor point in a shape. I'm going to select that direct selection tool and click on this anchor point and turn it into a smooth anchor point. I can also just grab a point and move it around and make minor adjustments. Which brings us to skill 6, reflection. This is where I had a lot of problems. But this is a very important skill, so it's really important to understand in a deep sense how it works. In Dave's video, he drew this half petal shape like we just drew. He got the direct selection tool, he picked the same point we just picked, he changed it to a smooth anchor point. Then he reflected this shape. So O is the keyboard shortcut for reflect. And it puts up that blue crosshair in the location where it thinks you want to reflect around. Dave said hold Alt and click this anchor point here. Make sure vertical is checked and create a copy. And that works. I knew that anchor point was important, but I didn't really understand why. And if you don't really understand it, you can't use it in new situations. So let's try it again. So I'm going to back up. It thinks now its guess is the last point I clicked. I'm going to go way down here and click, and it's still in exactly the same place. And this really demonstrates what I finally understood. And that's that unlike rotation, which really only needs a point, reflect needs a line. And that line is defined by two things, the angle of the line and a point on the line. Together they define a line. So in our example here, the line is the vertical axis. I could click anywhere on the vertical axis and it would work. Let's do another example. I'm going to use the same half petal. I'm going to say reflect. It's guessing this location here. I'm going to Alt click 1 inch to the right. And this is where it goes. Where's the line here? The line is the vertical line that runs through the point that you clicked. And the reflection starts 1 inch to the right of that line. So let's do another example. This time let's talk about the horizontal option that's in the dialog box. This time when I do reflect, I'm going to do an Alt click on the horizontal axis. It still says vertical. We'll click that to horizontal. It changes the angle in this option I'm not even picking to 0. And this is the line it's reflecting around, one with a 0 slope. So let's do one last example here, one where we don't rely on either the vertical or the horizontal selection, but we actually have to fill in a number. It guesses this point here, but we're going to hold down Alt and click the center point. It starts with the last choice, which is horizontal, which gives you 0 degrees on the angle. If you click to vertical, it goes to 90, a 90-degree slope. But we're going to pick this and we're going to set it to another number. And we'll just put in 45. Now, if you click the preview button on and off, you can see what the impact is of your transformation. And this is the line it's transforming around. It's reflecting across that diagonal line. How is this useful, you might ask? I'm going to show you that in just a second. But first, let's finish up this actual part of our mandala. So we're going to copy that other half of the petal. You can see it's not fitting together well there at the top. We're going to use our direct selection tool, pick those 2 anchor points, and do Control J, and that joins them into a single line there, and you see how that clarified the point. So now I'm going to select that shape. I'm going to click R for rotate. It's going to guess a point that's in the middle of the petal, but I want it to rotate around the center point here. So I'm going to Alt click that, 45 degrees, copy, Control D to duplicate. I did all this on the top level. I'm going to use my selection tool, select just the petals, and then I'm going to do Control C for copy, lock the layer, open the middle one, Control V to paste. And now what happens when I use my alignment tools? When I say align to vertical, it puts them all in a row like this, a column actually, not what I wanted. Just Control Z to back out of that, and then right click and on one of the shapes and say group. And now it treats it like a single shape, and when you do align to vertical, it does what you expect it to do. Hit I on the keyboard to get the eyedropper. Maneuver over to where you can see your swatches and hit the right swatch. And we're going to go for the middle, so that's working pretty good. But now when I do middle align to the inside of the path, nothing changes. And when I say align to the outside of the path, nothing changes. What's going on here? This is happening because a basic shape like an ellipse or a square has a clear inside and outside. But what I've done here is I've used the pen tool to create a shape, and it's an open shape. If I click on it, first I'll ungroup it. Yeah, so I can just get a single shape. It's easier to see what's going on. If you click on it, it's open at the bottom, so it doesn't know what inside and outside is. One way to correct this is to pick up the pen tool, go back, click on one of those ending points, and build a bottom to it. Now if I select that newly enclosed shape, and I once again go over to where I can see my swatches, I'm going to be able to put key in I to get the eyedropper. And then when I click on the align to the inside of the path, watch how the line changes. It goes inside, and outside the path it goes outside. And this is really important because you'll see in a lot of mandalas, these kinds of shapes are often filled to the inside to give you a real three-dimensional feel. So I just want to finish up here and put this set of petals onto the bottom layer. So I'm going to paste it there. I'm going to use this other method of centering that doesn't require grouping, and put it in place and use that bottom layer style. So now, as promised, I'm going to show you the real value of understanding reflect and how it works, and reflecting around an angled line. So this is a leaf I'm going to draw, and I'm just quickly sketching it in with a pen tool and putting a little bit of shape into it. And I've drawn a center line in my leaf that is clearly not at either a vertical or horizontal 0 or 90-degree angle. And I'm going to draw veins in the leaf using a line tool. And now what I want to do is I want to take these and copy them over onto the other side of the leaf using reflect. I hold down Shift and I select all 4 veins. I'm going to Alt-click the center line. The vertical option gives us a pretty scary output, so what we need to do is go up to Transform and see the angle, the slope of that line. 65.146. Now if I go back, hold down Shift, select the 4 veins, hit O on the keyboard or click on the reflect icon, Alt-click on that center line, and here I go type in on angle 65.146, and I say copy. Here's the preview button. It does what I wanted it to do. Reflect is a very powerful tool, and we're going to use it here again for the whole leaf. We're going to do the simple version here because all we want to do is reflect it over that vertical line. So select vertical, copy. Now I can take these 2 leaves and rotate them around the center of the drawing. And I Alt-click on the center, say 90 degrees, copy, Control D. Skill 7 is what you've seen me do many times now. It is the layer and stroke management process. You have basic good habits you have to develop here of locking and unlocking layers just as you use them, and using your swatches as starting points, but repetition and variety are important too. So there are things that you draw on layers, and in particular the top layer will often have a lot more detail than the layers below it. Here I used Alt-Shift to draw a perfect circle in the center. I'm going to use the line tool to draw a simple little line. I'm going to use the rotate tool to rotate 30 degrees around, so it's a little bit denser than what we've done in other cases. I have to use my direct selection tool to pull these ends out so everything touches. One of the last steps is to make sure that each layer is completely connected. Now here we've got a lot of space left between what we've drawn so far and the frame at the outside of the top layer. Each one of these layers are going to have to be extended out to touch the frame, and they have to connect well enough that after you cut them, they're stable and able to be assembled. This is my final custom mandala, and we'll turn off the bottom layers and look at it one layer at a time. So I've filled in a lot of the spaces that were open with other motifs. Here's my leaf. I have half of the veins on the top layer, and the other half of the veins are on the middle layer. I use motifs I like hearts and leaves. On the bottom layer, I did lines with little circles on them that peek through different parts of the design. So just experiment and have fun. The last step is to convert it for cutting, and the first thing you do here is to just make a copy. I label mine cut files, and very important, preserve your original design. In the cut files, you take one layer at a time. You do Control All to select everything. Go to Object, Path, Outline Stroke, and still with everything selected, you go to Pathfinder Unite. And that gets rid of all of the overlapping in the shapes. So now you want to set those outlines so that your laser cutter can read them. And I'm going to stroke, and I'm going to pick red because it's a cut line, so RGB red. And by habit, I put it to 0.001 because that's what I used to have to do for RD works. And then I took a look at what I had left. You turn off the fill, and you're just left with these strokes. And I had these strange little anomalies here where there was heavy red for no particular reason. When I went back to 1 point, which is what it is by default, none of that was there. Everything was beautiful and clean. And luckily, Lightburn can work with 1 point. Lightburn is the best $120 I've ever spent. So you do that on each of the layers. Path, Outline Stroke, Pathfinder Unite, change it to red, 1 point, remove the fill, and save it. And then the last layer, Path, Outline Stroke, Pathfinder Unite, change the color to red, 1 point, you're done. The final step, for each layer, you export the SVG. And this then is the file that you're going to import to Lightburn. I showed in my last video how when you import something to Lightburn, you can go into Edit, Delete Duplicates. There are none in this case because the Pathfinder Unite process really is pretty good at getting rid of duplicates. So that's all it takes to get it ready for your laser cutter. In my next video, I'm going to show how to use that design file you preserved to audition colors if you're painting it, which I'm going to be painting mine. Saves you a lot of work and mistakes. I'll also share some tips for cutting and assembly. So if that's interesting to you, and I have lots of other great things planned, please subscribe to my channel.